Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. It's Tommy with Elevation Every Weekend. Several weeks ago I did a comparison contrast video between these two bikes, my 2020 Surly ice cream truck and my 2014 Surly Pugsley. I kind of went over the bikes overall. I did touch on the wheel offset on the Pugsley a little bit, but I ended up getting some questions about it, so I figured I would do another real quick video and dive deeper down into the specifics of the Surly Pugsley wheel offset, why it is and how it operates and what the purposes of having it in the first place, and just give you some more details on it, since it is kind of an oddity in the bike world. So stay tuned, and we're going to go over it right now. Okay guys, we're going to start off real quick with the ice cream truck, just kind of as a baseline point of reference. It is a much wider rear axle spacing than the Pugsley, which we'll get to in a minute. It's 197 millimeters wide, but that's not really the key point. The key point, the thing to take notice of, is if you look at the seat stays, you can see that they're evenly spaced on each side of the tire. You can see them both clearly on each side, and they have the same point of reference on each side of the tire and the wheel. Another thing to take note of is if you look at the brakes here, you can clearly see the brake caliper and disc clearly exposed outside of the tire, again, which is what you would typically see on most fat bikes, mountain bikes. So that's just kind of a point of reference to take note of. So when I show you the Pugsley, you'll be able to really notice some of the differences. I'll point out one more thing, which is regarding the actual the wheel. If you look, the spoke pattern on the wheel is symmetrical, so there's two rows of spokes, and they're on each side of the wheel as they lace up to each side of the hub. So again, very traditional, typical type of design and setup that you would see on most bikes. Okay, so now we're going to take a quick look at the Pugsley. Again, this is a 2014 model. They have redesigned the Pugsley in recent years, the last few years, so I'll talk about that a little bit more later. But for this specific bike, the difference is in the rear spacing is 135 millimeter, and it has a 9 millimeter quick release, which is a very traditional old school mountain bike and even current road gravel bike spacing in the rear with the hub. So let's talk about a couple of unique things that you'll see looking at this bike and explain why they did it. First thing I just want to point out is some of the visual cues as to what the differences are. So if you remember just looking at the ice cream truck, the seat stays were very symmetrical as they came down and connected where the wheel mounted at the dropouts. If you look at the Pugs, it starts that way up top, and obviously the wheel is centered on the seat tube, but as you come down, you'll see on the drive side that the seat tube flares out where it actually meets the wheel, and that's where obviously your cassette, your drivetrain is. But if you look at the brake side, you'll see that it starts out the same as it is on the other side, but as it comes down, you can't even see the brake. There's no caliper, no rotor visible, and the reason is it actually kicks inward, and the offset on the rear is 17.5 millimeters. So that does a couple things. So let's try to zoom in here so you can hopefully get a better view. You can see it's coming down straight, and that is the kick in right there. It's hard to get an angle on it and film it, but you can see that's where it really kicks in. And again, as a result of that, when you center up on the wheel, again, you can't see the disc and really the brake caliper at all. It's inside the wheel essentially. So some questions might be, why would they do this? I think there's multiple reasons why. One of the reasons that they, even to this day, still promote is the ability to run a front wheel with a single speed cog on it, and have the ability that if you're bike packing somewhere and if your rear hub fails or freezes up if you're in the cold, which is obviously it's a fat bike, instead of having no ability to ride your bike, you can actually swap the wheels front to back and then kind of set it up single speed and at least keep going. So that's one of the reasons and benefits that they have designed it this way and still promote to this day. Another primary reason is when this bike was designed, it was the early 2000s. There was really no fat bike market at that time. So as far as the parts and things available that we have today to support the fat bike market, it just didn't exist. So they had to kind of work with what they had as far as having, they had all these, the proliferation of these 135 millimeter wide rear hubs. Is how are they going to make that work? So how are they going to fit fat tires on the bike and get it centered up in the frame, yet use a 135 millimeter wide hub, which just isn't, there's just not space to accommodate it symmetrically, at least. And I'll spin around and I'll show you one more interesting aspect as far as how it lines up on the wheel. So if you look at the wheel itself, obviously the hub is laced on both sides as it needs to be, but all of the spokes, and this is where the offset comes into play, all of the spokes are lined up on the drivetrain side of the wheel. So that is one of the unique features, is that's how you can set the brake caliper and rotor in so far and not have any clearance issues, not have any issues with, obviously the spokes on the caliper, is just by doing it that way, is by offsetting all the spokes to the drivetrain side. So that is another visual cue and oddity that you'll see with the Pugsley, is just that. So again, back to what I was saying about what was available in the early 2000s when they designed this bike. They had to kind of work with what they had, and these were some of the things that they did to work around it and make it work to allow these are 4-inch wide tires to fit the frame, yet use essentially widely available parts regarding the rear hub and drivetrains and things like that. That's how they made it work. In just a second here, I'm going to show you some other examples of some other wheels on the rear of this bike, just to kind of give you, again, some additional points of reference. But I do want to talk real quick about the current version of the Pugsley. They have changed the rear width to 142 millimeter. I believe they ship it with a 10 millimeter through axle, but it does have the roll-off slotted rear end, which gives you some adjustability. That's for like running a bigger tire, you can slide it back. But Surly does sell some spacer kits, and you can put those on and still run a 135 millimeter by 9 QR rear wheel hub setup on even the current versions of the bike by using their spacer kits. So again, they haven't completely given up on having the feature of that availability of that worldwide common standard. It still can be used on the current bikes, even though they have redesigned them, and you get the benefits of some other things. The new bikes also have the front fork is actually offset by 17.5 millimeters as well, to again accommodate, because they have changed the rear end. They now offset the front fork by 17.5 millimeters again, so you maintain the ability to run a single speed cog on your wheel up front and do that swap if you need to. Okay guys, I wanted to show you a couple more things before we wrap up the video. I do have the Pugs upside down. I do have the rear wheel removed. Just wanted to show you another interesting thing. So looking at the chainstay, this is the drive side. You can see that it kind of comes and flares out, which is where the cassette would be in here, with the derailleur and everything. But you can definitely see how that chainstay, you can see it's in line with the chain and then it kicks out, which is again more traditional design. But if you look at the offset side, which is the brake side, it actually comes back, it's just about straight. There's a little kick out at the very end, but again, just another example of how different it is. You can kind of see them both together there for reference. So just to kind of give you an example to really kind of show you what this offset means, I'm going to put a different wheel on the bike. So this is a 29 plus wheel. So it's 29-inch in diameter, 3-inch wide tire. It is the long discontinued Surly rabbit hole. I have these wheels because I'm thinking about doing a 29er plus build. I have this pristine set. But the interesting thing about this wheel is that it is 135 hub spacing as well, but it is not offset. So I'm going to put it on here and then you'll get an example of what that offset really means in relation to a non-offset wheel. Okay, so I have the 29er Plus wheel installed. It slid right in. There's no cassette or anything, so I didn't go that route, but it is the same 135 millimeter spacing with a 9 millimeter quick release. So it's exactly the same on that front and slides right in. However, because it's not offset to meet the Surly Pugs frame, it is not a workable solution. It does not line up. And what I mean by that is this. If you look at it from this angle, if you look straight down and use the seat tube as a reference, you can see that the wheel is not centered up on the seat tube. And then the other obvious example is if you look at the gap here between the tire and the chainstay, there's a significant gap, probably about 1 inch. But if you look on this side, there's very little gap. So that shows you how far off it is as far as the alignment. Again, 17.5 millimeters is the offset on the frame and the Surly Pugs rear wheel to line it up. So that's just kind of one example of what the difference is and what the difference makes. So just so you could see it. Another factor that would be a no-go, it's really kind of hard to get an angle on it so you could really see it, but as a result of the offset, the brake caliper would not line up with the rotor if I had a rotor in. I couldn't even put the wheel on if I had a rotor on because it would clash with the caliper, which is inset. So that would be another issue as well. And I actually just mounted up one more wheel. This wheel is actually off my Giant TCX, which is a cyclocross bike, which is a 700C road bike size plus wheel size, but it also has a 135 millimeter wide spacing. It does have a 9 millimeter quick release. It's prior to all the current gravel and even road bikes with through axles and disc brakes. It is a rim brake bike, but it slides right in. It fits right in there. It's actually secured, which is kind of interesting. So again, just a more drastic example. You can really see the offset there, how far off. You would never run this wheel and this tire on this bike anyways, but just as an example, you can really see the offset in play there, and how it does not line up with the seat tube, how offset it is in between the seat and the chainstays. One hypothetical though, by having this hub standard on this bike is hypothetically if you were somewhere else in the world and you had an absolute wheel failure in the rear, you could hypothetically find something that would work, that would at least get you moving again, even though it would not be necessarily ideal. There would be some potential options getting back going again. So it's one of the benefits and why as a worldwide traveler, especially remote worldwide travel, it's still promoted as one of the bikes that has unmatched versatility. Okay guys, hopefully you found that deeper dive into the Surly Pugsley and the oddity of the wheel offset helpful. If so, please like the video and subscribe. And there's a lot more fat bike content coming with both my fat bikes and many more. And if you have any questions or comments, please drop those down below. If you have anything to add, anything from your own experience that you found useful or detrimental to the design, please drop those down below too. So thanks a lot and have a great day.